Welcome back. Defense Secretary Ash Carter proposing a $582 billion defense budget for next year, reshaping spending priorities to reflect a new global strategy marked by Russian assertiveness and the rise of ISIS. Joining me now is former Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, Donald Rumsfeld. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us.
You bet.
I want to ask you about the defense budget, but let me ask you first about 2016 and the candidate. Who do you believe is the best candidate to handle the realities that we face, including ISIS?
Well, I think it's important to watch them run around the track for a while like they've been doing. We've got a very deep field of 10 or 15 people, all of whom are running hard, and I have watched these candidates, and it seems to me what the citizen has to do is to take their measure, to see how they answer questions, whether or not they're able to lead and be persuasive, whether they can think on their feet. And as we go through these primaries, I'll be developing my views just like a lot of people else across the country.
So Secretary Carter says that this $583 billion budget, which will be formally, by the way, unveiled next week, but he's devoting billions more on fighting the Islamic State. He's quadrupling funding for training and gear for Europe, and funding high-tech initiatives like micro-drones launched out of jet fighters and self-driving boats that could be used in the South China Sea. Do these sound to you like the right priorities for where we are today?
Well, I'd want to look at the budget carefully before I came to conclusions, but it seems to me that Secretary Ash Carter is there. He's made some judgments, and there's no question but that we're seeing an assertiveness on the part of Russia and Putin that's unfortunate and has to be sending shivers through Central Asia and the Baltics and various parts of Europe. So I think that makes sense, and the so-called reset button needs to be reset, as he's suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the biggest new initiative is this $3.5 billion request to beef up what's known as the European Reassurance Initiative. And, of course, that covers training and gear for the U.S. and European allies in the face of what's happening in Russia. What are your thoughts on how we've handled Russia so far?
Well, I think the way this administration over the past 7 years has handled Russia has been unwise. It hasn't worked. And I think people across the globe have looked and seen the assertiveness on the part of Putin and their activities in the Crimea, as well as what the People's Republic of China is doing in the South China Sea and the Spratly Islands. And they've seen the administration be either inattentive or unconcerned. And it is something, this behavior pattern is something that is concerning countries all across the globe. So I think it's a good thing that if the Department of Defense recognizes that problem and steps up and begins to make the kinds of investments that will be reassuring to our friends and allies around the world. You know,
and those friends and allies around the world have been trusting us less, frankly, given a whole string of issues, right? I mean, we didn't support Egypt's president at the time. He was toppled. We set a red line in terms of Syria and didn't do anything about it. And then just pulling out of Iraq was also an issue. What's your take in terms of what's needed now? I mean, you speak to a guy like Lindsey Graham, even Peter King in New York, and they say that these airstrikes now in their 17th month are not working.
Well, it's difficult for airstrikes to accomplish the goals. But, I mean, the fact is that this administration came in with, for the first time really, on the part of either political party, and created a vacuum in the world. And a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum. It's being filled. It's being filled by people whose values and interests are very different from ours. And I think that the absence of leadership has been notably harmful to the United States, to other countries around the world that do share our values, and to peace and security in the world.
Will we be able to get that leadership back?
I think so. If you think of the Cold War and the fact that leadership in both political parties over a sustained period, many decades, from the Truman administration on, showed a steadiness of purpose and a perseverance to win the Cold War over time. And what we're dealing with here is not a hot war in the sense of World War I or II. We're dealing with something that's going to take many years to defeat.
Right.
That's going to require mobilizing the moderates in the Muslim world and developing allies across the globe and working the problem consistently. And that takes leadership, and we have not had it.
Yeah, we'll see what comes out of the president's visit today to a mosque. I guess it's more of a, making a statement about mosques, which is why the president is doing today. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, it's show business.
Okay. Let me ask you about what you're doing aside from studying our foreign policy so closely. You've decided to get into the mobile app business. You've got a Churchill Solitaire app. Tell us about it.
Well, I do indeed. Winston Churchill played a solitaire game with 2 decks that was very complicated, strategic, requires you to look 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead. And he taught a friend of mine named Andre de Stark, who was a Belgian diplomat. When I was U.S. ambassador to NATO in the 1970s, Ambassador de Stark taught me the game. And I decided it would be a shame if it were lost to history. So people can go to Churchill Solitaire on the internet and download an app and play the game that Winston Churchill used to play.
I love it, because you've got a little bit of history all wrapped into that.
Indeed, and all of any profits I make are going to go to military charities so people can feel comfortable that they're supporting good causes, and the Churchill Heritage people are cooperating with us, and anything that they make from the app will end up going to the Churchill Heritage Foundation.
I love it. Winston Churchill, what a man. Thank you so much, Secretary. Good to talk with you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Maria.
We'll see you soon. Secretary
Excellent.
Donald Rumsfeld.